Welcome to the next episode of CNMI Speaks Out. CNMI Speaks Out is about domestic violence and CNMI culture. With this podcast, we will hear stories of brave women who overcame domestic violence and know more about their cultural upbringing. I'm your host, Jennifer Taman, and today we have the privilege of hearing our guest story. However, for safety and confidentiality purposes, our guest identity will remain anonymous. So, guests, welcome and thank you so much for being here and sharing with us your story. I know we were supposed to meet in person, but because of the quarantine, and we have to go virtual. And I just wanted to thank you for being here and being flexible with me.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm glad that you're feeling much better now.
Um, okay, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself? When did your relationship started, and like how would you describe your relationship?
Okay, my story started when I was in my early 30s. A friend of a friend introduced me to this person, and before I knew it, I was already in a relationship with this person. You know, at first I was hesitant to be in any relationship. When my kid's father left me, which was also a very unhealthy relationship, I decided to be single for a while. Then I met my recent ex-partner. Mm, at first we were great friends. We were always together to the point my kids were so comfortable with her, and I was also comfortable having her around with my kids. Um, I'm pretty protective over my kids, because they were still very young, and I don't know, I just don't bring people around them. But at the time, I felt that she was about having around my kids. So to cut the story short, she finally came out and told me how she felt, and I was feeling the same way about her. You know, it just felt so natural to be together when we were always together. I mean, since we were always together and we were having so much fun, and my kid seems okay with it. We started living together, my kids and I. We moved to her house, and my kids seems happy in the beginning. We were a family. Of course, every couple have fights and arguments, and we have no ex- we were no exception. But when we do fight or argue, she intends to say a lot of mean things towards me, like trash, used. The insult that comes out of her mouth was so bad. She would insult me like from head to toe. At first, I just thought, she was just saying those things because she was mad, or it was in the heat of the moment. So I paid little attention to it, but deep inside it bothers me that she can say all those things about me. For for me, being in an argument with me was just an excuse for her to say those things to me, which she actually wanted to say. Then the name calling and the insult got bad, and it just got worse. And she lost her job. She wasn't working, and I was, and it was just a constant insult coming from her. Every little thing I was doing was wrong, and I was either an idiot, stupid, or pathetic to her. Like, over time, if a person is constantly calls a name or degraded, that gets to that person's mentality. I was feeling insecure about myself. I always thought that I was the problem, and like I always tell myself, what can I do to change things around? At this time, I was already invested in this relationship. My children were so used to having her around. I asked myself, was I just going to get up and take my kids away just because I got my feelings hurt? I've asked her to stop several times and told her, and I told her how it makes me feel, but it was just like but it was like talking to the air, and it hurts when you allow yourself to be vulnerable to someone and your feelings, and let them know your feelings and they just ignore it. I really took that to my heart, you know. And then things got worse from there too. Not only like she would insult me from in front of my children, she would do it in front of her family too, and sometimes make fun of me in front of my family, which they all think was a joke, but she and I knew it was an insult. At this time, you know, at this time I felt so low about myself. My self esteem was destroyed, and I was constantly battling with myself, wondering how can I make it better for me? How can I make it better for her? How can I help her to stop saying those mean things to me? Yeah, it was a constant battle in my head. I'm always thinking, I'm always spaced out, thinking of how I can resolve this.
Yeah, I get it. And I'm really sorry to hear that you went through that. I wish I knew you then. I would have told you. I would have constantly told you how beautiful you are. I was just like constantly and randomly text you, "Hey, beautiful."
No, thank you, Jan.
You're welcome. So when and how did you come to the realization that you were in a domestic relationship?
Throughout that relationship, I never really thought that I was in a domestic relationship. I mean, she never really did hit me physically, and I think also I didn't want to admit back then that I was in that kind of relationship.
Right, right. Because when we think of domestic violence, like we think of only physical affliction, right? But we do forget that it affects our emotions and our mental health as well. And yeah, of course, I can so relate when you said that you didn't want to admit that you were in a domestic relationship. I was the same. It's hard to believe that the person you love can put you in that kind of situation. So can you tell us or describe what you think might have led up to it?
What am what might have led my partner? Um, I think she just has some anger issues or some issues within herself that she didn't or couldn't resolve. And when she was frustrated, or when we were in an argument, all that frustration she was having on herself gets directed towards me. Also, when I think about it, like the name calling and insults just got much worse when I became the breadwinner of the family, because maybe, and when she lost her job, and the insults were just coming left and right and any time of the day. And I think, maybe she felt a little insecure within herself, and how hard it was for her to get another job. And I just think I became her punching bag emotionally, which is a very horrible thing to do to someone, especially the person you co-partner and the person you claim you love.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like insecurities, right? It's either it makes you or break you. I mean, everybody gets insecure about themselves, right? But it's how we handle those insecurities. I mean, either you make yourself better to eliminate that certain insecurity, or you allow it to take over you and make you do things that are hurtful towards others. And unfortunately, in most partnership or relationship, insecurity becomes the center of the relationship, which makes the relationship like a toxic one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I know you said that you didn't realize that you were in a domestic relationship. So is it safe to say that you didn't tell anyone about what was going on, or did you reach out for help, or if you did, what were the response that you got?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't, um, my friends were he, my friends were hers, we hang out with like the same group of people. At times I tell myself that I was just being dramatic or sensitive. So I never really spoke about it with anyone or with my family. And so I never really spoke about it with anyone or my family. And when my family around, when my family is around, she mellows down. Um, when she would say something, she would just say it in a joking way, in a joking manner. But come to think of it, I did have a friend that told her not to talk to me that way in front of them. And then her response was that it was just a joke, or I was just joking, and that she's fine with it. But that was it. That was it, as far as I can recall.
Okay, so when she was insulting you, like somebody else noticed it, like your friend, right?
Oh yeah, but I didn't stop her at all. She was just more careful of who was around us.
I get it. Like she doesn't want to show it to other people, or she does, like, because someone noticed it, right? Yeah, I get what you mean. So what were the factors that made you decide to leave that relationship or stay in that relationship? I know you're no longer with her, and yeah, so what made you decide to leave that relationship?
You know what really made me leave is was my kids actually. I've noticed that they were speaking to each other in a very hateful way. They were so mean to each other. They were they were just not loving towards each other. And I wonder why my kids was like that. So one day when I picked them up from school, I asked them, why do you guys talk to each other that way? And the response was that really hit me was that, you know, it was back then when they were still like entering the teenage years, and the response was, that's how you and talk to each other, and and or that's how she talks to you. And my kids see it, like my kids realize it before I did. They're like, that's how she talks to you, and you're okay with it. So them is them seeing that someone else talked to me that way made it seem that made them think that it was okay for them to talk to each other that way. And that just hit me. I mean, here I am trying to be with someone so that my kids will grow up having a complete family. Here I am trying to provide a happy home for them. But they're growing up, and the words they used to each other was so hurtful towards each other. And I just knew that from then on that I need to get me and my kids out of this situation. I don't want my kids to grow up in that kind of environment. I mean, I never grew up in that kind of environment. My growing up, it was always be respectful and love your siblings. And yeah, I've never heard anybody insult my mom. And when my kids are growing up, they hear constant insults and constant of negative words. And that's not where I want my kids to grow up. That's not what I want for my kids. So, I decided to get our own place. And, I told her that I feel like it's not working out, and the kids and I are moving out. And of course, she thought it was, at first she thought it was a joke. She's like, go ahead, whatever. Or, um, so we did. We left. And, like, I work with my kids. I made sure that they know that they have to learn, that they have to talk to each other with love and respect, and that words can be really hurtful. if you use them in a different negatively on how it can impact someone. And yeah, it was a work in progress. Not only was I working with my kids, but I was also working on myself. I had to rebuild myself and tell myself that what she was saying was not a reflection of me, but a reflection of her. That's not who I was, and you know, I try to build myself. I try to rebuild myself and rebuild a home for me and my children. And eventually, my kids, they still get into arguments, especially now. They're almost a young adult. And no, actually not now. When they were much more of a teenager because of the hormones or what. But now they're more nicer to each other and they're very respectful and they understand the things that we went through was not, was not right. And that's all I could ever ask for.
Well, good for you that you laugh, and honestly, that's very admirable that what you did, because you stood your ground and you're just like, I'm not gonna have this. This is not how my kids are gonna grow up, and it's very inspirational as well. So yeah, I'm glad that you're able to see what was your boundaries and follow through. When you left that relationship, right? Can you please describe your experience on how your family and friends treated you?
Nothing big or anything. I think it was just my kids that had troubles in the beginning. I mean, they were still very young when she and I got together, but eventually, after how many conversations I had with them, explaining that can't come around and how it was bad for my mental health and all that, and like I said, I worked with them and, you know, made sure that what they saw growing up of how I was being treated is not the right way to treat someone else. You know, eventually they understood the situation, they understood what the message I'm trying to relay, and that's one of the best thing of being a mom is that your kid will always have your back.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's so true. I'm the same with my daughter. She always has my back, and I always have hers. And children are like our for me, children are our strength and our weaknesses. So, do you believe that our culture or your upbringing contributed to your response to domestic violence? And if so, can you please explain?
Yeah, growing up, my parents always taught us kids to be kind to each other, especially one another, to be kind to other people, especially to one another. I never really had a bad relationship with my siblings. We grew up in a household that there's so much respect for each other. My mom would always spank me and my sister if she and I get into a fight and, call each other names. My mom always told us that we don't hurt family, and that's what that's what I want to pass on to my children. And when I saw that wasn't happening, I had to make sure that as their mom to figure out why and correct that because there were siblings, and there will be a time in their life where I will no longer be here, and all they have is each other, and they have to love each other, and they just have to be there for one another.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a very important value to instill in our children is to respect others and, love one another, right? I mean, there's so much ways to communicate with one another, so much positive ways to communicate. Yeah. What advice do you wish to you could have given yourself before the violence began?
Advice I would have given myself is that you don't have to tolerate what is happening to you because you are trying to, because you're trying to make sure that you're building a family, you're trying to keep your family intact. No, you don't have to do that. And that your mental health is very important. And loving yourself is also very important. And don't ever let anyone bring you down, no matter what the circumstances is. You know, that's what I would have told myself.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Well said. And I felt that. I felt that. I wish I would have told myself that too. But, I wish, like, I would have given myself that same advice too. So, what advice would you give to other survivors or individuals who still currently in a domestic relationship?
Um, I to set boundaries. Yeah, just to set boundaries and never jeopardize your self worth or your mental health, and that it never jeopardize your self worth or your mental health. That if you feel like or you think that something is not right in your relationship, talk to someone. Don't normalize it. Don't give excuses for your partner's action. Don't blame yourself. And of course, always remember that always remember that the people around you, especially the kids, are the one that suffers the most in a very unhealthy and toxic relationship. If you know that the environment is not good, you know, then it's time to change it and make sure that you give your kids the best healthy environment.
That really touched my heart. Yeah, we always have to do the best for our children, right? It's always our children first. And it is our role as an adult to make sure that what we give our kids good examples to live by, so that when they become adult themselves, they will pass on that example to their children and on to the next generation. What do you wish the community understood, or sorry, what do you wish the CNMI community understood about domestic violence?
I just wish, I just wish the community talk more about domestic violence and emphasize on what types of domestic violence are there, maybe emotional or mental, physical, and that have our younger generation understand how the words can be very damaging to someone if used in a wrong way. Words are very powerful, and I think that the earlier our kids knows about it and understands that, the nicer they will be with each other. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Words are very powerful. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us and allowing us to learn a thing or two about the power of words. You're such an amazing person, and you're a great mother, and your kids are so lucky to have you. And yeah,
No, thank you for having me and allowing me to share my story. I really appreciate it, Chan.
well, you're very much welcome. Well, there you have it. That's the end of our episode. And to our listeners out there, please always remember the power in the words we use and how it is perceived by others. Let's all continue to practice to be respectful and be considerate of others' feelings. To our listeners out there, hope you all enjoyed today's episode and thank you for tuning in with us. Please come back again next week as we talk more about domestic violence and CNMI culture. Lastly, if you are experiencing domestic violence or know someone who might be experiencing domestic violence, please call 911 or our CNMI's victim hotline at 670-234-5100. Thank you, and please tune in again next week. The CNMI Speaks Out has been made possible in part by a major grant from the Northern Marianas Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, finding, conclusion, or recommendation expressed in this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council or the National Endowment for the Humanities.